G'day, Legends. I hope that you're all doing well. Now, we're going to talk about some news and, whose side that time is actually on in this war. But as always, we're going to start with the maps and some also intelligence updates coming out. So what I really want to read to you is the newest British Defence Intelligence Update. And then we'll look on the map and see what this is actually looking like. So Russia's assault on the Donbass town of Bakhmut has largely stalled. This is likely primarily as a result of extreme attrition of the Russian force. Ukraine has also suffered heavy casualties during its defence. The Russian situation has also likely been made worse by tensions between the Russian Ministry of Defence and Wagner Group, both whom contribute troops in this sector. Russia has likely shifted its operational focus towards Avdiivka, south of Bakhmut, and the Kremenasov sector in the north, areas where Russia likely only aspires to destabilise its front line. This suggests an overall return to a more defensive operational design after inconclusive results from its attempt to conduct a general offensive since January 2023. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the maps and see in those areas of Avdiivka and Bakhmut what they're talking about. So, of course, we have Ukraine in the middle, the capital of Kyiv. The red being occupied territory since 22 and the purple since 2014. And we've got Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. So we're going to be coming in is on this region here in Bakhmut. Now, the map was only updated in the last 45-ish minutes, and it's the 25th of March, at least here in America. But this is the most recent deep state map out. So let's go back 2 days. And this is something that I think a lot of the reporting, and if you just Google Ukraine Bakhmut, it will say the Russian offensive has completely stalled. And I'm not saying they're lying, but I'm saying the maps aren't really saying that. So we go on the 23rd, last time I saw you. And then on the 24th, we said that Russia has moved all the way sort of up here. Now, I know this isn't far, but what they have done is managed to shorten their front line and move more into these blocks on the west of the Bakhmut River. Now, one of the biggest problems we've seen in this war is how long the front line is and how dispersed troops are. So any period where you can shorten that front line, going from these two dips into this is of benefit. But also in the north, we've seen them move further through these industrial areas and also the underground areas in here. So let's have a look and up to today. And on the north, this is the reservoir that apparently was blown up at this bridge here and flooded through here, but it didn't seem to have much effect, and I didn't see any other photos of it at all. But we have seen that Bakhmut is continuing to close in. One funny thing I did see is that the grey zone here actually becomes less, which I don't know if it's just a mapping thing or where, the assessed fighting was seen from other days. But let's just look to the north as well. And not much. We saw some little movement up here, but not huge. So what we'll do, as always, is we'll get Bakhmut here and then we'll compare it to the Rybar map. And Rybar is showing similar, that they are pushing into these southern blocks from going north into Bakhmut and have crossed the Bakhmut River on this. And at least some of the maps show this as well. So where we're going to go is we're going to go across to the live UA map, as live UA does show some interesting things now and again. So let's have a look at Bakhmut and see if this shows anything of crossing the Bakhmut River. So if we look here, not really. And it's still showing this southern district is fairly open. And in my opinion, the live UA is not super accurate when it comes to this. But we'll also have a look on the ISW map as well. So if we zoom in on Bakhmut, this will show a small bit of assessed control moving across the Bakhmut River, which we have seen for a while, but also further assessed control in the north of Bakhmut, more up through here. So it's interesting to look at these and sort of compare them at the same time. So what we also have is this of the just conditions you see fighting. So this is a truck moving apparently on this road through Kromove, which to at least my knowledge and what I'm seeing is really the last road available to go in and out of Bakhmut. And that road is still open and usable, although people are saying it's a death road as the amount of vehicles going up and down. You can just see how much tanks and these heavy trucks have chewed up this road. Now, something that I do find interesting is Avdiivka and some of the massive differences on the maps. Now, sadly, I don't have a Russian sources Rybar map today, but let's see if there's been any movement of territory around Avdiivka in the past 48 hours. Not really. There's only this tiny bit down to the south here, which is actually Ukraine gaining some territory down here, heading towards that pre-2014 border. But the big difference is, if we go back onto the live UA map, you will see a very different picture. So look at how surrounded Avdiivka looks here. So if we just compare these, if we do Lashachkeni here, and then we compare it, they're saying it's right up into this. And let's see if we can get a better map just to show. So if we take sort of how Avdiivka looks and this village here, and we look, they're saying it's right up into here. And it's a very different picture, both on the north and south. So they're saying they're right up into here, and they're almost at Berdichi here, which it makes it look so much more surrounded than the other maps. And the funny thing is, I find Live UA absolutely the most conservative towards Russian gains. That said, we know that the ISW is very good as well, and the ISW isn't showing the gains that Live UA is showing. So, as always, I don't really know where this front line is sitting, but we know it's probably sitting somewhere in and out of here, and there are reports of a lot of heavy fighting around these regions from Ukrainian sources as well. Now, what we've seen is also this bridge blown up in Makivka, and let's have a look at where this is. So this is where it actually is, and if we put this into Google Maps, we'll see that there's a bridge here, and then we'll go across to the ISW map, and we will see that the Russian forces have blown up this bridge here. Now, on the sort of ISW, it looks like there are multiple bridge crossings here, sort of in this blue region, as the Russians are assaulting to the west. But the reason I have the Google map is it actually doesn't show that these other ones cross. So it shows, just to the north and south, some other ones here crossing, where Google Maps is painting a different picture with only this crossing here. Let's see if there's any way we can drop down into here. No, we're not going to have any luck. As we've said before, Google Earth View dropping in is not very good in these areas. So somewhere else I want to talk about is Novokhovka. Now this region is in Kherson Oblast, and it is just down. So if we zoom right out, I just want to show you where we're talking. So we're talking just in here at Novokhovka. Now you will have seen some maps that have showed that Russia completely pulled out of here, and then we cleared up very quickly. No, the Russians didn't pull out. It was actually just a statement released by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that was lost in translation somewhere, and they cleared that up fairly quickly. But what it is said is that there was just a massive rotation of Russian soldiers here. So we could maybe assume fresh soldiers and ones going out on break. And as we know, this region has been a source of much fighting. So this green area here, of course, is where the Ukrainian Kherson offensives and the Russians to fall back on to the southern side or the eastern side of the Dnipro River, which basically splits the country in half up here. So we know that this region is somewhere where Ukraine do want to cross, but we have this natural sort of border of the river causing a lot of issues moving across that. But that'll be the end of our mapping today, and then we'll talk about how time and the effects on this war. So the news of today, really today we heard that a Ukrainian counteroffensive may not be ready. Now, to a Japanese newspaper, when asked about expected counteroffensives, President Zelensky has said, "We can't start yet. We can't send our brave soldiers to the front line without tanks, artillery, long-range rockets. And we are waiting for ammunition to arrive from our partners. If you have the political will, you can find a way to help us. We're at war and can't wait." But there's a lot of people saying that this could be a ploy to possibly have the Russian forces not be fully prepared for that offensive and potentially make moves that could put them in positions to then be compromised. But if you see when Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner Group, talks about these offensives, he talks in length about where he thinks they'll come for and waiting from it. So we don't really know. But what we do know is an offensive from Ukraine is coming, and it has to come soon, as Russia continues to slowly but surely grind away at small bits of ground every day. Now, we talk a lot about military tech advantages and the outcomes of this war and how that will have an influence. But in many ways, this war has turned into a war of attrition. Attrition warfare is a military strategy consisting of belligerent attempts to win a war by wearing down the enemy to the point of collapse through continuous losses in personnel and material. And this is what we've seen over the past months in Bakhmut, Vuhledar, and now also in Avdiivka, is both sides claiming their lack of advance or a lack of withdrawal on the claim that they're killing so many of the enemy soldiers that they're fatiguing them to a point that they will be unable to launch future offensives. Now, I personally believe in at least Bakhmut, this is the case where both sides are actually correct in this, in that both sides have taken such huge losses that it's actually stalling future offensives. But that said, Russia's losses here recently have really been predominantly private Wagner Group and not Russian regular forces, although shell starvation equipment loss is a huge issue on both sides. Now, you'll hear people claim that time is on the side of the Russians or time's on the side of the Ukrainians. And the variable here is actually really public opinion and continued support of both sides, especially in Western democracies. On one hand, time benefits Ukraine, as Ukraine can continue to defend itself and retake territory for as long as the United States and Europe keep the guns and the dollars flowing into Ukraine, with many US and EU countries saying their support will last as long as it takes. Western support has its peaks and troughs, but the support's not crumbling like is being somewhat reported, especially with the current US administration. That said, the 2024 elections will have this as a focal point, and this could change. The reliance on Russian gas hasn't been as catastrophic as first thought, although prices have skyrocketed. And the longer the war goes on, the more sanctions will start to be felt in the general Russian public and potentially reduce the popular and elite support for the war and put pressure on Putin to de-escalate. Also, these sanctions are making the production of high-end technical equipment much harder and sometimes impossible to make. But on the other hand, where time benefits Russia, Ukraine's military capabilities are almost entirely dependent on continued support from the West, and especially from the United States. And Western publics could get weary of the war as the costs mount, and the risk of war breaking out into a wider scale is definitely increasing. And also, if the Republican Party do get voted in 24-25, this could shift support greatly, as some European countries have only been able to donate as much as they are because the US ultimately is NATO's security and they're within that NATO bubble. Recently, Russian troops have not been on the back foot, and they've actually had time to fortify the defensive positions and refill their ranks with conscripts and also professional soldiers. And Russia has a huge military-industrial complex and can still pump out a lot of equipment and a large population, and history shows Russia's willingness to use this population and to use and lose huge numbers of men. And lastly, the West has used up basically all of its leverage against Russia, other than striking Russia itself. And sanctions have so far somewhat failed to cripple the economy or the military. And Moscow continues to have strong commercial and security ties with countries like China and India, and lethal ties with Iran, North Korea, countries like that. And unlike what some outlets might say, from my research, the average Russian has not actually seen a huge decline in their day-to-day living standards. So what do you think? I think that ultimately it comes down to the USA and China, as both countries, they can continue this war deep into the future, and there are absolutely benefits for both the US and China to continue this conflict. Although I do think Russia is more willing to put their population into further hardship than the West is on average Ukrainians. But China has remained neutral in this conflict so far, although people question this stance with their refusal to acknowledge the nature of the conflict and has avoided calling it an invasion at all, and has not cut any ties with Russia, almost the opposite. And I guess this really follows the idea of if you're neutral in situations of injustice, then you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Now, President Xi's visit to Moscow last week did reaffirm to many where exactly China sits on this conflict. As yet, President Zelensky has said, "I did not get a proposal from China to mediate. I didn't get the proposal to meet." This comes after last week it was being reported that President Xi would call Zelensky after meeting Putin. But I guess time will tell. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate all your support. If you'd like to support me further, there's links down below, but never feel obligated to do that. So look after yourselves, and I'll see you tomorrow or the next day. I missed yesterday because it's just a huge day, and you can hear me a bit rusty from maybe a few too many beers last night. But look after yourselves. Okay, bye-bye.